My heart was still racing from the accident that delayed me. As the executive boardroom door closed behind me, my eyes locked onto the presentation screen. Those charts, those metrics, that revolutionary system integration methodology, 6 months of my sleepless nights displayed in perfect clarity. But standing at the podium, commanding the room with a confident smile as if she'd birthed every insight herself, was my assistant. The quarterly report I was supposed to present had already begun without me. I'm Alyssa Moore. And in my 32 years, I'd never felt my professional world crumble quite like this moment. As Director of Innovation Projects at Vanguard Systems, I'd weathered hostile takeovers, budget cuts, and impossible deadlines. But nothing had prepared me for the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. The boardroom air felt thick, suffocating. 15 minutes late, that's all it took for my entire world to shift. The traffic accident on Interstate 5 had been unavoidable. A 3-car pileup that brought everything to a standstill. I'd called Madeline Cross, my assistant, frantically explaining I'd be delayed. Her voice had been understanding, reassuring even. "Don't worry, Alyssa. I'll stall them. Stall them? Right. Now." Watching her gesture confidently at my data visualization, explaining the intricate system integration methodology I developed through countless late nights, I understood the depth of her deception. The executives hung on her every word. Daniel Whitmore, our CEO, nodding approvingly. Patricia Hayes, CFO, taking notes. Marcus Sterling, our biggest client representative, leaning forward with interest. The breakthrough came when we realized the legacy systems weren't the limitation. Madeline was saying, using the exact phrasing from my private notes. By creating a middleware solution that operates on a distributed architecture, we can achieve 340% efficiency gains while reducing operational costs by nearly half. She kept saying we, but her body language, her tone, everything screamed sole ownership. My fingernails dug into my palms as I stood frozen by the door. Unnoticed by most, but not all. Tom Rodriguez from engineering caught my eye, his expression a mixture of confusion and sympathy. "This is remarkable work, Madeline," Daniel said, and my stomach lurched. "The board will be impressed. How did you manage to overcome the integration challenges with the Morrison framework?" The Morrison framework, my baby, my innovation, named after my late mentor. I'd spent 3 months alone just working out the theoretical foundation. Madeline paused, just for a fraction of a second. But I caught it. She didn't know the technical details, couldn't possibly explain the mathematical models underlying it. "Well," she began, her confidence wavering slightly. The key was recognizing that traditional approaches were limited. She was vamping now, using buzzwords to fill the gaps in her stolen knowledge. Under my direction, the team explored alternative pathways. Under her direction, the words hit like physical blows. "Actually," she continued, and this was where the knife truly twisted. I should mention that while Alyssa Moore provided some initial input, there were significant leadership challenges that I had to navigate. The project nearly derailed several times due to, let's call them strategic disagreements. Fortunately, I was able to maintain team cohesion and drive us toward this successful outcome. Leadership challenges, strategic disagreements. She was rewriting history with me still standing in the room. Patricia looked up from her notes. "Where is Alyssa? Shouldn't she be here for this?" Madeline's expression shifted to one of practiced concern. She called about some delay. To be honest, this has been a pattern lately. Missing critical meetings, arriving unprepared. I've been covering as best I can. But she trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air like poison. The rage that bubbled up in my chest was volcanic. 6 months. 6 months of 70-hour weeks, of missing my sister's wedding rehearsal, of surviving on coffee and determination. I'd mapped every integration point, written every line of the methodology, tested every hypothesis. The 3 a.m. breakthrough that solved the Morrison Framework challenge had happened in my apartment, with Madeline nowhere in sight. I believe that answers most of the technical questions, Madeline said, clicking to the final slide, my slide, with projections I'd calculated last week. The 60-day implementation timeline is aggressive but achievable. We're ready to move into production phase immediately. 60 days. I'd specifically documented why 90 days was the absolute minimum for safe deployment. 60 days would mean cutting corners on security protocols, skipping crucial testing phases. It was a recipe for catastrophic system failure, but it sounded impressive. Bold, executive-worthy. Daniel stood up, extending his hand to Madeline. Exceptional work. I think we've seen enough to approve moving forward. Madeline, I'd like you to take point on this. Full authority to build your team and execute. Take point. Full authority. My project, my innovation, my life's work. Handed over in a conference room I was barely acknowledged in. As the meeting began to break up, I finally stepped forward from the shadows by the door. Interesting presentation, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The room turned. Madeline's face went pale for just an instant before her mask snapped back into place. Alyssa, oh good, you made it. I was just covering the highlights for everyone. Covering the highlights. 6 months of innovation reduced to coverage, and me reduced to a footnote in my own story. The first concrete evidence came by accident. I'd stayed late on a Thursday, debugging a critical integration issue that threatened to derail our timeline. The office was empty, or so I thought. As I walked past the executive conference room to grab printouts, I heard Madeline's voice through the cracked door. The real problem is Alyssa's risk aversion, she was saying. Every time we need to make a bold decision, she pulls back. Analysis paralysis, you know. I've had to push things forward despite her hesitation. I froze, recognizing Patricia Hayes' voice responding. That's concerning. The Morrison framework seems revolutionary, though. How did she develop it if she's so risk-averse? Well, Madeline paused, and I could picture her calculated expression. The initial concept was collaborative. Several of us contributed ideas. Alyssa's strength is documentation. I'll give her that. But innovation requires more than just writing things down. Collaborative? Several of us. The Morrison framework had been born during my sabbatical, 2 weeks alone in my cabin in Lake Tahoe, with nothing but whiteboards and obsession. Madeline hadn't even been hired yet. I pulled out my phone, started recording. What do you suggest? This was Marcus Sterling, our key client. I think a transition period might be wise, Madeline said smoothly. Keep Alyssa on for technical documentation, but shift leadership to someone with more strategic vision. The 60-day timeline I'm proposing would demonstrate that boldness. 60 days? Patricia sounded skeptical. The original plan showed 90 minimum. That's Alyssa's conservative estimate. I've run my own analysis. We can cut at least 30 days by parallel processing the deployment phases. I've already identified the redundancies in her plan. Redundancies. Those weren't redundancies. They were safety protocols. Fail-safes to prevent system-wide crashes. I wanted to burst in, confront them all. But I forced myself to keep recording, gathering evidence. The meeting notes I found 2 days later were even more damning. Someone had left them in the shared printer again, maybe intentionally, maybe through carelessness. Either way, they painted a clear picture. Madeline had been conducting weekly alignment sessions with various executives for over 2 months. The subject line was innocuous: Project Prometheus Optimization Discussions. But the content was pure character assassination. A.M. Displaying increasing territorial behavior. One bullet point read: refusing to share critical information with team leads. Another: concerns about A.M. is ability to scale. Strong technical contributor, but lacks executive presence. And my favorite? M.C. has been instrumental in maintaining stakeholder confidence despite project leadership challenges. M.C. Madeline Cross. Positioning herself as the savior of a project that wasn't even in trouble until she started sabotaging it. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of emails where Madeline had asked for input on presentations she'd later give without attribution. Calendar invites to meetings I'd mysteriously never received. Slack messages where she'd volunteered to handle executive updates to free up my time. The pattern was brilliant in its simplicity. She'd created a shadow version of my project, one where she was the de facto leader and I was the difficult technical resource who needed to be managed. Every interaction had been designed to reinforce this narrative. When I finally attempted a gentle confrontation, her response was masterful. "Alyssa," she said, eyes wide with concern. "I'm worried about you. You seem really stressed lately. Maybe you're taking on too much. I've been trying to help by handling some of the routine stuff, but if you feel I'm overstepping..." "The executive meetings," I started. "Oh God, those boring budget reviews? Trust me, you're not missing anything. Daniel specifically said not to waste your time with them. You're too valuable on the technical side. That's where you shine." Where I shine. In the background, in the shadows, in the code where no one would see me or know my contributions. "But the 60-day timeline you mentioned to Patricia, did Patricia tell you that?" Her face showed perfect surprise. "I was just brainstorming out loud. You know how executives are. They always want everything faster. I was trying to manage their expectations. Buy us more time by starting high so we could negotiate back to your 90 days. Every accusation deflected, every concern reframed as her trying to help. She'd even managed to make me sound paranoid for questioning her motives. I watched her return to her desk, pulling up what looked like another presentation. My presentation, no doubt, being reformatted with her name strategically placed. She caught me watching and smiled, that same warm smile from her first day. "Coffee run?" she offered. "Oat milk and half a Splenda, right?" Still playing the devoted assistant, even as she sharpened the knife for my back. Tom Rodriguez from engineering stopped by my desk later. "Hey, Alyssa, weird question. Madeline asked for the source code for the Morrison Framework integration modules. Said you approved it for her Stanford case study." I wanted to double-check. That's pretty sensitive IP. I hadn't approved anything. "When did she ask?" "This morning. She said it was urgent, needed it for a board presentation tomorrow." A board presentation, tomorrow, which I knew nothing about. "Don't send it yet," I told Tom. "Let me review the request first." He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Yeah, something felt off. She said you were too busy to ask directly. But you've never been too busy for security protocols before." "Never too busy for security protocols." But according to Madeline's narrative, I was too rigid, too conservative, too risk-averse. Every strength recast as a weakness, every precaution painted as paranoia. That night, I stayed late again. But not to code. I was building a different kind of framework, one that would expose the architecture of Madeline's deception. If she wanted to play strategic games, she was about to learn that the best engineers don't just build systems. We also know how to make them crash. The morning of the quarterly report started like any other disaster, with perfect timing. I'd left home an hour early, knowing traffic would be heavy, knowing this presentation would determine the project's future. My slides were polished, my data bulletproof, my confidence steady despite weeks of Madeline's undermining. Then the 18-wheeler jackknifed across 3 lanes of Interstate 5. I sat in my car, watching emergency vehicles crawl through the gridlock. My phone showing 8:47 a.m. The presentation started at 9 Diurn sharp. Daniel was notorious for starting exactly on time, no exceptions. "Madeline," I said when she answered on the first ring. Too quickly, I'd realize later, like she'd been waiting. "Alyssa, where are you? Everyone's gathering. Major accident on I-5. I'm completely stopped. Can you stall them? Tell Daniel I'll be there in 15, 20 minutes, max once traffic moves." Oh no. Her concern sounded genuine. "Don't worry about a thing. I've got your slides from the shared drive. I can start with the introductory context until you get here." Introductory context. That should have been my warning. By the time I reached Vanguard Systems at 9:15, the security guard gave me a sympathetic look. "Running late for the big meeting? They started a while ago. A while ago? Not 15 minutes. A while. I half ran through the lobby, jabbing the elevator button repeatedly, my heels clicking against marble like a countdown timer. When the boardroom door finally closed behind me, the presentation was on slide 23 of 30. The substantive content, the innovations, my life's work. The breakthrough insight, Madeline was saying, laser pointer steady in her hand, was recognizing that traditional integration approaches created unnecessary bottlenecks. By redesigning the entire architecture from first principles, we've achieved something unprecedented. But her stance, her tone, her entire presence radiated sole ownership. Daniel Whitmore barely glanced at me. Patricia Hayes didn't acknowledge my arrival at all. Marcus Sterling from Sterling Enterprises, our make-or-break client, was taking photographs of the slides with his phone. My slides. My work. This 60-day timeline, Marcus said. It's aggressive. What makes you confident it's achievable? 60 days. There it was again. I'd specifically documented 90 days as the absolute minimum. 60 would mean skipping critical security protocols, load testing, redundancy checks. It was a recipe for catastrophic failure, but it sounded bold, decisive, executive-worthy. I've identified several processes that can run in parallel. Madeline replied smoothly. The previous estimates were based on sequential implementation. But that's outdated thinking. We can compress the timeline significantly without compromising quality. Previous estimates. My estimates, now relegated to history. Dismissed as outdated thinking by someone who couldn't even write a basic Python script without Stack Overflow. Impressive, Daniel said. And you developed this methodology yourself? The question hung in the air. This was Madeline's moment of truth, her chance to acknowledge my contribution, to admit she was presenting my work. I held my breath. It's been an intensive 6 months, she said, not quite answering but not denying either. A lot of late nights, a lot of trial and error. The team has been supportive, though there have been some challenges in getting everyone aligned with the vision. Challenges. Getting everyone aligned. She was painting me as the obstacle without even saying my name. Patricia looked up from her tablet. Speaking of the team, what's Alyssa's role been in this? Finally, someone asking the right question. Madeline's expression shifted to practiced concern. Alyssa has been involved. She's excellent with documentation and routine tasks. However, I've had to take more direct control recently. There have been some performance concerns, missed meetings, resistance to stakeholder input, difficulty adapting to agile methodologies. Performance concerns. I'd missed exactly one meeting, today's, due to an act of God. The resistance to stakeholder input. That was me refusing to promise impossible deliverables. The difficulty with agile methodologies. I'd literally written our department's agile implementation guide. That's troubling, Daniel said, finally acknowledging my presence with a glance. Alyssa, glad you could make it. We're nearly finished here. Nearly finished. With my project, my career, my reputation. Actually, I started. But Madeline cut in. Oh, Alyssa, perfect timing. I was just about to cover the technical implementation details. Since you're here, would you like to handle that part? Her smile was magnanimous, offering me scraps from my own feast. I know how much you enjoy the granular details. Granular details, technical implementation. She was boxing me into the role of technician while she played visionary leader. I'd prefer to discuss the strategic timeline, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Particularly the difference between the 60-day proposal and the original 90-day plan I developed. Original plan? Marcus looked confused. Ms. Cross, you said the 90-day timeline was the conservative estimate from the technical team. It was, Madeline said smoothly. Alyssa led that technical assessment, very thorough, very careful. But strategic implementation requires balancing technical preferences with business needs. Technical preferences. like not having the entire system crash and burn because we skipped critical testing phases. Daniel stood up, the universal signal that the meeting was ending. Excellent presentation. Madeline, I think we have enough to move forward. I'd like you to take project lead effective immediately. Full authority to adjust team composition as needed. Full authority to adjust team composition. I was being fired from my own project in corporate speak. Alyssa, Daniel continued, please ensure all project materials are transferred to Madeline by end of day. We'll discuss your transition to other initiatives later this week. Other initiatives? There were no other initiatives. This was the initiative, the one I'd been hired to create, developed to revolutionize our entire integration strategy. As the executives filed out, congratulating Madeline on her breakthrough work, I stood frozen, watching my professional life evaporate. Marcus Sterling shook her hand vigorously. This is exactly the kind of innovation we want to see. Bold, decisive, forward-thinking. Tom Rodriguez lingered, catching my eye with a look of pure confusion. He knew the truth. A few others did too. But in corporate politics, the truth was whatever executives believed in boardrooms. Madeline waited until we were alone. Alyssa, I know this is hard, but it's for the best. You're an amazing technician, but leadership requires different skills. I'm sure Daniel will find something more suited to your strengths. My strengths, the ones she'd spent months redefining as weaknesses. The 60-day timeline will fail, I said quietly. You know that, right? Without proper testing, without the security protocols. That's exactly the kind of negative thinking that's been holding the project back, she interrupted. Sometimes you have to take risks to achieve greatness. She walked out, leaving me alone in the boardroom where my career had just died. On the screen, still displayed, was slide 30, the final slide, the one with project credits. There was only one name, Madeline Cross, project lead. My name wasn't even in the footnotes. I became a ghost in my own office, and it was exactly what I wanted. The email came that afternoon. Effective immediately, Project Prometheus leadership transitions to Madeline Cross. Please ensure all materials, access codes, and documentation are transferred by 5 p.m. today. Signed by Daniel. CC to the entire executive team. I complied with surgical precision. Every file transferred, every access code documented, every piece of official documentation handed over. But I also did something else. I created my own shadow archive. Screenshots of every email where I'd raised concerns about the 60-day timeline. Technical specifications showing why certain tests couldn't be skipped. Risk assessments that Madeline had never seen because she'd never asked for them. I'm really sorry about how this went down, Madeline said, standing in my cubicle as I packed up my personal items from the project war room. If it helps, I'll make sure you get credit as a technical contributor. Technical contributor? 6 months of innovation reduced to a line item. The 60-day timeline, I said, keeping my voice neutral. You'll need to skip the load testing on the Morrison framework modules. Her eyes lit up. Was I actually helping? Oh, that's good to know. That'll save us at least a week. And the security protocols for the API integrations, those can probably be compressed too. I pulled up a document on my screen. See these redundancy checks? Probably overkill. She leaned in, eager to absorb any shortcuts. This is really helpful, Alyssa. See? We make a good team. You handling the technical details, me driving the strategic vision. I nodded, saving a copy of her eager agreement to bypass critical safety measures. Just trying to help you hit that 60-day target. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched from the sidelines as Madeline accelerated everything. She brought in contractors who didn't understand the underlying architecture. She approved parallel development streams that I knew would create integration conflicts. She promised features to Marcus Sterling that weren't just ambitious. They were technically impossible with our current infrastructure. Tom Rodriguez found me in the cafeteria one day, looking exhausted. She's got us working 20-hour days, he said. And she keeps changing the specifications. Yesterday, she promised Sterling we'd have real-time synchronization across all legacy systems. Do you know how impossible that is? Did you document her request? I asked casually. What? The specification changes. The promises. Did you document them? He looked at me strangely. Yeah, actually. Started doing that after she denied approving something last week. CYA, you know. Cover your ass. The programmer's survival instinct. Good, I said. Keep doing that. And Tom? Make sure you keep copies of everything off the company servers too. Personal backups. Why would I? He stopped, understanding dawning. How bad is this going to get? Remember the Morrison framework's load limitations? His face went pale. She's promising double that capacity. Triple, actually, according to yesterday's client call. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I didn't need to. Madeline was doing it all herself, driven by ego and ignorance in equal measure. Every warning I'd built into the system, she saw as an obstacle. Every safety protocol, she viewed as unnecessary delay. She was so focused on the glory of delivering in 60 days that she couldn't see the cliff she was racing toward. The beauty was in the details she didn't understand. The Morrison framework wasn't just innovative, it was delicate. It required specific sequences, careful calibration, extensive testing. Skip any of those steps, and it wouldn't just fail, it would fail spectacularly, taking down any system it was connected to. 3 weeks in, I submitted my formal resignation letter, effective after the 60-day deadline. You're leaving? Daniel seemed surprised when HR forwarded it to him. This is rather sudden. I think it's best, I said simply. Madeline has her vision for the project. My presence might complicate things. He studied me carefully. You don't think she can deliver? I chose my words precisely. I think she'll deliver exactly what she's promised. A non-answer that was entirely true. She would deliver what she promised, a system launched in 60 days. Whether it would work was another question entirely. If you have concerns, he started. I've documented all my concerns, I said. They're in the project files. Madeline has full access to everything. Everything except the wisdom to use it. Daniel let me go, probably relieved to avoid conflict. But I saw doubt creeping into his eyes. Good. He should be worried. Week 4 brought the first cracks. A test deployment crashed, taking down the development server for 6 hours. Madeline blamed the testing team for not following procedures. The testing team had emails showing she'd approved skipping the standard protocols. Week 5, Sterling's technical team started asking uncomfortable questions. Why were certain security features missing? How would the system handle peak loads? Where were the redundancy protocols? It's all under control, I heard Madeline say in a hallway conversation with Patricia. These are just normal development hiccups. Normal development hiccups. Like the Titanic had a normal ice problem. I kept my head down, worked on my transition documents, and waited. Every evening, I updated my private archive. Every urgent shortcut Madeline demanded, every safety measure she eliminated, every impossible promise she made, all documented, all time-stamped, all indisputable. Tom stopped by my desk the day before the big presentation. She's planning to do a live demonstration, he whispered. Full system integration, real-time data flow, the works. A live demo. With an untested system, in front of the board, the executive team, and Sterling's entire technical leadership. Did you suggest doing a recorded demo instead? I asked. She said that would look weak. She wants to show absolute confidence in the system. Absolute confidence. Pride goeth before the fall. And Madeline was about to learn that in biblical proportions. Tom, I said quietly, make sure you have documentation showing you raised concerns. And maybe take a sick day tomorrow. He looked at me for a long moment. It's going to be that bad? I submitted my resignation for a reason. He walked away, and I returned to my transition documents. One more day. One more day until Madeline's 60-day miracle would reveal itself for what it truly was. A house of cards built on stolen foundations, rushed construction, and reckless ambition. I wasn't going to sabotage her. I was just going to let her succeed exactly as she'd planned. The presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. Friday, the grand culmination of Madeline's 60-day miracle. By noon, the entire building buzzed with anticipation. The main conference hall had been reserved, with overflow seating connected via video link. Marcus Sterling had flown in personally with his technical team. 3 board members had cleared their schedules. This wasn't just a project launch, it was Madeline's coronation. I submitted my resignation that morning, effective immediately. Alyssa, this is highly irregular, HR Director Janet Walsh said, frowning at the document. Don't you want to see the project through? The project is in capable hands, I replied carefully. Madeline has made it clear she has a different vision. My presence would only complicate things. Janet looked skeptical, but processed the paperwork. As I was cleaning out my desk, Daniel Whitmore appeared. You're not staying for the presentation? His tone was neutral, but I caught something in his eyes. Uncertainty. Maybe even suspicion. I think it's best if Madeline has the spotlight she deserves, I said. This is her moment. When he studied me for a long moment. I've been reviewing some of the technical documentation. There seem to be some discrepancies between the original timeline assessments and current projections. Discrepancies, such a diplomatic word for complete fiction. I'm sure Madeline can explain her optimization strategies, I said, maintaining eye contact. She's been very confident about the 60-day timeline. Yes, Daniel said slowly. Very confident. Before leaving, I made one stop. The security office. Hi, Brad, I said to the head of building security. I'm heading out, but I wanted to mention, I've been getting some strange system alerts from the test servers. Might want to have your team on standby this afternoon. Brad, a former military IT specialist, raised an eyebrow. What kind of alerts? Memory overflow warnings, processing conflicts, the kind of things that happen when systems are pushed beyond their limits. He understood immediately. I'll have my team ready. I also sent one email to Daniel, CCing myself at my personal address. Subject line, Risk Assessment Documentation for your review. The body was simple. As requested, I'm forwarding the complete risk assessment for the 60-day implementation timeline. These documents have been in the project repository since week 2. Best regards, Alyssa. He hadn't requested them, but now he couldn't claim he'd never seen them. At 1:45 p.m., I was sitting in a coffee shop across the street, laptop open, logged into my personal email. Tom Rodriguez had sent a message. She's doing final system checks. Already 2 minor crashes that she's calling calibration adjustments. This is insane. At 1:55 p.m., another message. Sterling's technical team is asking hard questions about load balancing. She's promising a revolutionary demonstration that will answer everything. At 2 p.m. exactly, I pulled up the company's public investor relations page, which would live blog key presentations. The first update appeared, Madeline Cross, Project Prometheus lead, beginning presentation to assembled stakeholders. 2:05 p.m. Live demonstration of full system integration commencing. 2:08 p.m. Initial data flow successful. Real-time synchronization achieved across primary platforms. She'd gotten past the first hurdle. The basic connections worked. I'd built those foundations solidly enough that even she couldn't break them immediately. 2:11 p.m. Scaling up to demonstrate full-capacity load handling. Here it comes. The Morrison framework had strict load limitations that required gradual scaling. Jumping straight to full capacity was like redlining a cold engine. 2:13 p.m. Technical pause for system optimization. Technical pause. That meant something had crashed. 2:17 p.m. Demonstration resuming with adjusted parameters. My phone buzzed. Tom. First crash took out the primary server. She's routing through backups. Sterling's team is getting nervous. 2:20 p.m. Ms. Cross demonstrating revolutionary parallel processing capabilities. Revolutionary parallel processing, the same parallel processing I'd specifically documented as incompatible with our legacy systems without extensive reconfiguration. She was about to hit the wall. 2:22 p.m. No update. 2:24 p.m. No update. 2:27 p.m. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. My phone rang. It was Brad from security. Alyssa, did you know your system just tried to access restricted financial servers? We've had to implement emergency protocols. Is the building's primary infrastructure safe? Yeah, we isolated it in time. But their demonstration system is completely fried. And I mean fried, we're seeing cascade failures across every connected component. 2:35 p.m. Presentation concluded, follow-up meetings to be scheduled. Concluded, not completed, not successful. Concluded. My phone buzzed again. Tom, you should have seen it. Complete meltdown. The system didn't just crash, it corrupted 3 weeks of test data. Sterling walked out. Daniel looks like he's going to have a stroke. Madeline tried to blame the infrastructure team, but Sterling's technical lead called her out on bypassing security protocols. I closed my laptop, gathered my things, and walked to my car. As I drove past the Vanguard Systems building, I saw people streaming out, earlier than usual for a Friday. Word was already spreading. That evening, I received a call from Patricia Hayes. Alyssa, we need you to come in Monday morning. Daniel wants to discuss the project situation. I've resigned, Patricia. My last day was today. Your resignation is on hold pending review, she said firmly. We need to understand what happened. Madeline is saying you sabotaged the demonstration. Sabotage? Of course that would be her play. I wasn't even in the building, I said calmly. But I'll come in Monday. And Patricia? Make sure Daniel reviews the email I sent him this afternoon. The one with all the risk assessments that were ignored. There was a pause. What risk assessments? The ones documenting exactly why a 60-day timeline would lead to system failure. The ones that have been in the project repository since week 2. The ones Madeline had full access to but chose to ignore. Another pause, longer this time. Monday, 9 a.m., executive conference room. I'll be there. I hung up and opened my personal archive. Every document, every email, every piece of evidence that showed Madeline had been warned, had been given all the information she needed, and had chosen to ignore it in favor of speed and glory. She wanted the project? She got it. She wanted the credit? She got it. She wanted to be the bold leader who delivered the impossible? She got that too. And now, she would get the consequences. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes everything feel inevitable. I walked into Vanguard Systems wearing my best suit, the one I'd bought for my initial interview 5 years ago. If this was going to be my professional funeral or resurrection, I'd dress for either outcome. The executive conference room was packed. Daniel Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Patricia Hayes reviewed documents on her tablet. 3 board members I recognized flanked them. Marcus Sterling was there too. Which surprised me. Clients didn't usually attend internal postmortems. His technical lead, a sharp-eyed woman named Sandra Liu, sat beside him. And Madeline. She stood by the presentation screen, a stack of papers in her hands. Her usual confidence replaced with something harder, more desperate. Alyssa, Daniel said as I entered. Thank you for coming. We need to understand what happened Friday. Before I could respond, Madeline launched in. What happened is sabotage. Alyssa deliberately withheld critical information and set traps in the code to make the system fail. That's a serious accusation, Patricia said. Do you have evidence? Madeline pulled up a code repository screen. Look at these unnecessary constraints in the Morrison framework. Load limitations that serve no purpose except to cause failures. She built them in to trigger exactly what happened Friday. Sandra Liu leaned forward. May I? Without waiting for permission, she commandeered the keyboard, pulling up the code in question. Her fingers flew across the keys, diving deeper into the architecture. The room watched in silence for 3 minutes. These aren't traps, Sandra said finally. These are safety protocols, Industry standard. In fact, they're more elegant than most I've seen. Whoever wrote this understood that pushing past these limits would cause cascade failures. Exactly, Madeline said triumphantly. She knew I'd pushed the system to show its full capacity. So you knowingly exceeded documented safety limits? Marcus Sterling's voice was dangerously quiet. Madeline faltered. The timeline required optimization. Show me the documentation, Daniel said. Where Alyssa informed you of these limitations? She never. I pulled out my laptop, connected it to the room's display. May I? The first document appeared. Risk Assessment 60-Day Timeline Implementation. Date stamp, Week 2 of the project. Sender, Alyssa Moore. Recipients, all Project Prometheus team members, including Madeline Cross. Page 3, I said calmly, scrolling down. Section 2.3, Load Limitations of the Morrison Framework. Exceeding these parameters will result in cascade failures affecting all connected systems. Madeline's face went white. I never received this. I pulled up the email receipt, opened by M. Cross, 9:47 a.m., April 15th. You spent 12 minutes reading it according to the tracking data. But you should have told me directly. Like in this meeting? I clicked to another document. April 20th, Project Prometheus Weekly Review. Attendees, full team. Minutes show my presentation on critical safety protocols. You're quoted here saying, "We need to think beyond conventional limitations." That's not. Or this email thread. Another click. Where you specifically asked me to identify which safety measures could be optimized out. And I responded with a detailed explanation of why each one was critical. The room had gone silent. I continued, methodically presenting evidence. Meeting minutes where Madeline had overruled technical concerns, emails where she'd promised impossible deliverables, documentation she'd received and ignored. This is particularly interesting, Sandra Liu said, pulling up another file. This commit history shows Ms. Cross actively removed safety checks from the codebase 3 days before the demonstration. The commit message says, removing unnecessary delays. I was trying to meet the timeline, Madeline said, her voice smaller now. The timeline you created, I said. The original project schedule was 90 days minimum. You shortened it to 60 to impress the board. Daniel turned to me. Why didn't you escalate this? Now came the crucial moment. I did, 3 times. I pulled up my emails to him. However, each time, Madeline scheduled meetings with you immediately after, reframing my concerns as resistance to innovation and fear of change. After the 3rd attempt, when I was told the decision was final, I focused on documentation. Documentation for what? Patricia asked. For today. I said simply. I knew the system would fail. Physics doesn't care about corporate ambition. So I made sure there was a clear record of every warning, every bypassed protocol, every ignored risk assessment. Marcus Sterling stood up. Ms. Cross, you assured us this system was revolutionary. You said Ms. Moore's conservative approach was holding back innovation. The approach was revolutionary, I interjected. The Morrison framework is genuinely innovative. It just requires proper implementation. With the original 90-day timeline, including all safety protocols and testing phases, it would have transformed your integration capabilities. Could it still? Sterling asked, looking directly at me. The foundation is salvageable. The corrupted data can be recovered from backups. With proper implementation, 90 days, full testing protocols, all safety measures intact? Yes. Daniel stood as well. Madeline, you're relieved of all Project Prometheus responsibilities, effective immediately. Please collect your personal items and report to HR. You can't. This is discrimination. I was set up. She manipulated. Stop. Patricia's voice cut through the protest. You have 2 options. Resign quietly with a neutral reference, or we investigate this as gross negligence and potential fraud for misrepresenting project status to stakeholders. Madeline looked around the room, searching for support, finding none. Her eyes landed on me last, filled with rage and something else. Recognition, perhaps, that she'd been outplayed at her own game. She gathered her things and left without another word. The room sat in silence for a moment after the door closed. Then, Daniel turned to me. I owe you an apology. I should have listened more carefully. You listened to what was presented most confidently, I said. That's human nature. Will you take back the project? Patricia asked. I looked at Marcus Sterling. 90-day timeline, full testing protocols, my team, my way. Agreed. Sterling said immediately. Sandra will be your technical liaison. She's impressed with your architecture. Sandra nodded. The Morrison framework is brilliant, properly implemented. It could set new industry standards. Then I'll see you all in 90 days, I said, standing to leave. Daniel called after me. Alyssa, your resignation. I turned back. Withdrawn. But I'll be keeping better documentation going forward. And Daniel, next time someone tells you a timeline is impossible, maybe ask why before asking them to make it possible anyway. The room reorganized itself around my return. Daniel pulled up project charts on the main screen, while Patricia started making notes about resource allocation. But it was Sandra Liu who asked the question that mattered. The damage from Friday's demonstration, she said, studying her tablet. My team's analysis shows data corruption across 3 primary servers. That's weeks of integrated testing lost. Actually, Tom Rodriguez said from the doorway, laptop in hand. About that, everyone turned. Tom walked in, connecting his machine to the display system. I've been running parallel backups on an isolated server, he said, pulling up logs. Every build, every test cycle, every configuration change. Ms. Moore suggested keeping independent documentation. I took it a step further. The screen filled with pristine data structures, uncorrupted test results, clean configuration files. You magnificent bastard, Sandra breathed, then caught herself. Sorry, but this is everything. We can restore from this point and lose maybe 2 days, not 2 weeks. I felt a smile tugging at my lips. Tom, when did you start these backups? The day after Madeline promised 60 days. Something about the way you said, document everything, made me think we'd need an insurance policy. Daniel looked between us. You knew this would happen. I knew physics doesn't bend to ambition, I replied. And I knew my team. Tom, Janet from testing, Rob from infrastructure. They all saw the writing on the wall. They protected what they could. Where is Madeline now? Marcus Sterling asked suddenly. Patricia checked her phone. Security says she's clearing out her office. HR is processing her immediate termination for gross negligence. Through the glass conference room walls, we could see her in the distance, carrying a cardboard box, her heels clicking on the marble with none of their former confidence. She passed by our room, and for one moment, our eyes met through the glass. I saw it all there, the rage, the humiliation, the disbelief that her perfect plan had unraveled. But also, something else, the dawning realization that every shortcut she'd taken, every safety measure she'd ignored, every warning she'd dismissed had been documented, preserved, waiting for this moment. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She never realized I wasn't playing at all. I was just letting physics and documentation take their natural course. 90 days, I said, turning back to the room. Starting today. Tom, your lead architect. Janet, I want testing protocols that would make NASA jealous. And Sandra, your team's insights on the framework optimization were excellent. Let's incorporate them properly this time. What about the 60-day promise to the board? Patricia asked. Marcus Sterling laughed. Actually laughed. After Friday's disaster, they're lucky we're not pulling the contract entirely. 90 days with Alyssa's team is better than 60 days of fireworks. Speaking of the board, Daniel said, they want a full presentation on what went wrong and how we're fixing it. I'll handle that, I said. But this time, I'm driving myself. No traffic delays. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the room. The tension that had been wound tight for weeks finally began to ease. One more thing, Daniel said as the meeting broke up. Alyssa, the board approved a new position, VP of Innovation Integrity. It comes with oversight of all critical projects, authority to enforce development standards, and a mandate to prevent another Madeline situation. Interested? VP of Innovation Integrity. A position created from disaster, but designed to prevent future ones. I'll need full autonomy on technical decisions, I said. Done. And the ability to override timeline promises that violate safety protocols. Agreed. And Tom Rodriguez as my senior architect. Tom's head snapped up, eyes wide. Daniel smiled. I think that can be arranged. As everyone filed out, discussing restoration plans and new protocols. I remained seated for a moment, looking at the presentation screen where my Morrison framework architecture still glowed 6 months ago. I'd dreamed of revolutionizing our integration systems. I'd nearly lost everything to someone who saw my dream as a ladder to climb. But here's the thing about building something real, something that matters. It has its own weight, its own truth. You can steal credit, you can rush timelines, you can ignore warnings, but you can't fake physics. You can't charm your way past cascade failures. You can't network your way around corrupted data. Madeline had thought success in tech was about perception, presentation, and politics. She'd learned the hard way that, ultimately, it was about what actually worked. Tom stuck his head back in. Alyssa, team's gathering in the war room. Ready to build this thing properly? I stood, closing my laptop, leaving the past in that conference room. Let's show them what revolutionary really looks like. As I walked toward my team, my real team, the ones who'd quietly prepared for this moment, I passed Madeline's former office, already being cleaned out, already being prepared for someone new. In tech, as in physics, nature abhors a vacuum. She'd created one with her ambition, and it had collapsed in on itself. The Morrison framework would launch in 90 days. It would work perfectly, securely, revolutionarily, and everyone would know exactly whose innovation it really was. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone, it's about letting them destroy themselves while you quietly build something indestructible. Madeline's badge clattered into the security box by the exit as I watched from the window. She walked out of Vanguard Systems, her silhouette shrinking against the afternoon sun until she disappeared entirely. I never saw her again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you made it this far, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and please share your thoughts about Alyssa's journey. Have you ever faced a similar situation at work? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments.